Hey there everyone, today we're talking about Season 2 of Mobile Suit Gundam Iron-Blooded Orphans. Just a heads up, if you're new, I already did a pretty comprehensive look at Season 1 a few months ago, so if you missed it, be sure to check that out. Much like Season 1, Season 2 of IBO follows the mercenary group Tekkadan as it fights battles across both Earth and space to carve a place for themselves in a bloody future. Much like Season 1, Iron-Blooded Orphans, Season 2 is appropriately dark, edgy as a 14-year-old at Hot Topic in 2008, and seems to try to answer the question, hey, what if we just made every bad thing ever happen to the protagonists? Now that might seem a little harsh, so let me be clear, I really do like Season 2. It's just that Season 1 is a little bit more fun overall, and a lot less depressing, but the final 25 episodes have kept me entertained on multiple watch-throughs. The second half of this show aired from October 2016 to April 2017, with a full year gap between seasons for its Western debut. And I remember really looking forward to this back in the day, and it's still pretty rare now that I watch anime as it airs. This will be my third time watching through this season, and for the sake of this review, I watched the Japanese version with subtitles, though I have seen the dubbed version before in the past. So grab your tissues and get ready for a manly cry as we take a look at Mobile Suit Gundam Iron-Blooded Orphans Season 2. This season opens 2 full years after the Battle of Edmonton at the end of Season 1. Tekkadan has become famous to some and infamous to others after defeating and shaming Gjallarhorn. Season 2 begins with Tekkadan being at their most expansive and influential, having opened an Earth branch led by Tekkadan and continuing as military advisors and trainers to the Arbrow Defense Force. While Orga's talk in Season 1 of making a home for the members of Tekkadan seemed to have paid off, Kudelia's hopes of revolution and a brighter overall future have pretty much been doused. Because of Tekkadan's involvement in Arbrow's election, procurements of mobile suits among mercenary groups and other organizations have skyrocketed. This will become way more apparent later on in the season as new mobile suits are introduced pretty regularly, and enemies that may have had only 2 or 3 mechs in Season 1 now have entire squadrons that are armed to the teeth. One of these new models of mobile suit is the Shiden, which is currently being outfitted for Tekkadan's use. Tekkadan's expansion has not been restricted to the Earth branch, as we see that even at their Mars HQ, new recruits have been formed into a reserve corps. Among these fresh faces are the new characters Hush, Zack, and Dane, a trio that allows us to see Tekkadan through a newer perspective, though Hush is the one that really takes the spotlight among them. They complain about not being allowed to have the Alea Vignana surgery, the system that allows them to pilot mobile suits by directly connecting their nervous system to the machine, as Orga has outlawed its application for new recruits, but Shino reveals to the rookies that the Shiden isn't AV equipped anyway. Speaking of Orga and the old guard of Tekkadan, they have all pretty much taken up leadership roles. While Orga now wears a striking red suit and spends most of his time behind a desk or in meetings, Eugene and the others now handle all the duties that keep Tekkadan running day to day. Eugene has actually been promoted to deputy boss of the entire company and fills a role similar to Orga in Season 1, usually in command of the Isaribi or the newly outfitted Hodoribi. Mikazuki is the captain of the Mobile Suit Commando Squad, which basically means he moves about the battlefield hitting weak points as he sees fit. Shino and Akihiro are both heads of their own mobile suit squads as well, and all this leads to the battles in the second half of Season 2 being much bigger than Season 1. Season 2 is split up into a few distinctly separate arcs. The first arc involves Tekkadan doing another job for Kudelia's Admos company. One of the concessions that Arbrow gave to Kudelia in the end of Season 1 was control over the half-metal resources that it mined from Mars on the Arbrow territory. The Admos company runs a newly opened mine, and unfortunately that brings them attention from a group known as Terra Liberonis. Kudelia stands up to the group's leader, Mr. Gyojin, who's trying to pressure her into a business relationship. It seems that Terra Liberonis is pretty much bankrupt after the colony uprisings in Season 1, and Kudelia is known to be giving tours of the mine to representatives of other colonies within the month. While Kudelia's strong hand against Mr. Gyojin seems like a good thing at the time, it drives him to the crazy extreme of committing a terrorist bombing. He seems like a really nice guy. In fact, Gyojin is so nice that he targets Tekkadan in a car bombing that almost takes out Mika while he's picking up Cookie and Cracker from school. Making things personal for Tekkadan is always a smart plan, of course, and this causes Orga to immediately take Kudelia's job offer of protecting the mine during the tour. Terra Liberonis hires a massive pirate group called the Dawn Horizon Corps, a group so fearsome that even Teiwaz has a hard time keeping them in check. The pirates attack the mine and initially fight to a standstill against Akihiro and Shino's units, but the arrival of Mikazuki in the newly upgraded Barbatos breaks the pirates' morale and they retreat. Orga talks with good old McGillis Farid, who offers to help take out the DHC with the reasoning that the pirate group has expanded to the Earth sphere. McGillis is in charge of Gjallarhorn's reformation after the Edmonton incident and has been promoted from Specialist Major to Brigadier General. This promotion came along with all the headaches that the current Gjallarhorn faces, from rebellion and armed uprising in the colonies and economic blocks to internal strife among the different fleets and noble houses of the Seven Stars, particularly a faction of the Seven Stars led by a man named Rustal Elian, who has taken command over the Arianerhad fleet after the death of Karda Ishu. Along with him is a young noble named Iak Kujan, and boy do I have a lot to say about him later. Of course, the world of Iron-Blooded Orphans is about as rife with different factions and political leanings as Reconquista in G was, but why is it that it just sort of works in IBO and failed in G-Reco? Personally, I believe this is because IBO has a much more grounded world, and while there are a bunch of different factions and sub-factions, they all have very easy to understand goals. Gjallarhorn isn't the only faction with internal strife, as we see that Orga is given the go-ahead by McMurdo, the head of Teiwaz, to pull off an anti-Dawn Horizon Corps operation. This decision is immediately questioned by a newly introduced character, Jazly Donamikels. Jazly is the head of JPT Trust, a shipping company that holds a lot of power within Teiwaz, and Jazly is essentially McMurdo's number 2 man. The thing about him is he's super insecure about his position in Teiwaz, so Tekkadan's rapid power gain over the past few years has made him incredibly wary of the group. Not to mention Tekkadan's connection to the Turbines, who Jazly also hates as he views Naze as a potential competition in the future of Teiwaz. Tekkadan isn't immune to internal strife either, as there's a definite disconnect between the Earth branch and Mars HQ. While Chad is in command of the Earth branch, his second, a man named Radis Reloado, looks down on the original members of Tekkadan in a way very similar to the adult members of CGS in Season 1. Radis refuses to divert Shiden mobile suits to the Mars HQ to help fight the Dawn Horizon Corps, and it almost seems like Tekkadan Earth branch is a different company altogether. Even among those at the Mars HQ, some discontent rears its head. Hush, who becomes the most fleshed out of the new Tekkadan recruits, has a bone to pick with Mika. He doesn't understand why people give Mika so much respect, and makes fun of his nickname, the Devil of Tekkadan. To Hush, Mika is a layabout with no real goals. The reason that this bothers Hush so much is that he grew up in the slums, and when he was a child, one of the older orphans got the AV surgery so that he'd be able to work. Unfortunately, the surgery was a failure, and he eventually took his own life in order to not be a burden. Hush deifies his dead friend and doesn't understand why someone as apparently lazy as Mika could survive the surgery 3 times. This misunderstanding manifests itself as an intense jealousy, and once Hush witnesses Mika's skill as a pilot, it even leads him to seek guidance under Mikazuki as a pilot himself. I've seen people compare Hush to Shin from Gundam Seed Destiny, but honestly, he's not that annoying. In fact, later on, his single-mindedness when it comes to flying mecha is pretty endearing. Orga rendezvous with McGillis' right-hand man, Isurugi. And yes, it's a little confusing when there's a character named Isurugi and a ship named Isuribi, and Isurugi's on the Isuribi, and, you know, it just, to my white boy ears, it's very similar. Anyway, Isurugi has the location of 3 ships belonging to Sandival Rooters, the leader of the Dawn Horizon Corps. The plan is for Tekkadan and Isurugi to speed ahead of McGillis' main forces to capture Sandival before he can escape. But of course, nothing could ever be that simple. Besides the fact that the DHC has a fully mobilized mobile suit corps, Gjallarhorn ships show up in the middle of the battle and start to interfere. Isurugi explains that these are Gjallarhorn soldiers loyal to Rustal Elian, so Orga orders everyone to ignore them and focus on Sandival. By the way, Sandival launches in his personal mobile suit and it's pretty cool looking. The faceplate definitely reminds me of Isaac from Dead Space. Orga places all his bets on Mika being able to capture Sandival, and though he's interrupted by the new Gjallarhorn character Julieta, he's able to break away with the help of Isurugi and face the leader of the pirates one-on-one. Sandival puts up a fair fight, but there really isn't much that he can do against a pissed-off Barbatos that is dual-wielding giant maces. Tekkadan's win against the DHC causes further rifts to open within Tewaz, as McMurdo is impressed with their rep and decides to put them in charge of a newly minted half-metal mine outside of Kreese. If Jazly didn't like Tekkadan for their speedy ascension and connections to Naze before, well, he definitely does not like them now. This mine sits on a plot of completely unspoiled land, and could bring income for Tekkadan for the next 20 years. Honestly, a pretty good prize for Orga, and a better reward for taking out the Dawn Horizon Corps than he probably thought. Naze does try to warn Orga that the aggressive way that he's gaining power is going to gain him enemies, and maybe he should slow down and smell the roses a little bit. This is something that Orga ruminates on throughout the season, but soon after Naze gives him that advice, Orga makes one of the dumbest decisions that he possibly could. Orga has a meeting with McGillis, who tells him the plan to reform Gjallarhorn, with himself on top. Currently, McGillis' goal is to become more powerful than his rival Rustal, and he wants Tekkadan as an ally in this endeavor. While Tekkadan and McGillis' branch of Gjallarhorn have a working relationship, it does appear to be tense, and while Orga is rightfully distrustful of the Brigadier General, he accepts the offer and their shadow relationship has officially been brokered. Oh yeah, also the Inner Circle of Tekkadan personally confront Gyojin at the Terra Liberonis offices and present him with a bill for double Tekkadan's damages. Of course, he can't pay and tries to get his security team to kill them, but Tekkadan forces have discreetly taken control of the building, and then Mika does one of his favorite things in the world, shoots him right in the head. Guess they're bankrupt now, huh? The first arc of Season 2 does a lot to show how Tekkadan has grown over the last 2 years. They're prosperous enough to be developing new mobile suit platforms in cooperation with the Turbines, and the Shidens that they do end up getting easily outpace any of the grunt suits in Season 1. They have multiple squadrons of mobile suits led by veteran pilots, a far cry from back in Season 1 when they had to scrap together armor for the Barbatos and rely on a stolen Graze for support. You might think that Tekkadan in the early part of Season 2 is kind of at that place that Orga has been striving for. They have enough power to be safe on Mars, the backing of Tewaz now that they're full members, and actual stable income from the half-metal mine, not to mention allies within factions of Gjallarhorn and the economic blocks. Not only that, but they're living up to their ideals and the ideals of their dead comrades. We see that illustrated by the new recruits largely being young men with nowhere to go that are treated better by Tekkadan than anywhere else on Mars. And that's kind of what Naze tries to tell Orga during their conversation at Saisei. Orga has had to live fast and make life or death decisions for his entire life, and now that it's time to slow down a bit and let the rewards actually begin to trickle in, he can't sit still. Orga has always seemed like the kind of person that moves the goalposts for whatever it is they're trying to achieve. In Season 1, he consistently tells Mika that he wants to find their place, to build something that will last for their chosen family, and it really seems like Orga could have had that if he just slowed down a bit. But ambition and opportunity going hand in hand rarely makes for a boring life, and we see that discontent is brewing within Tekkadan's Earth Branch. Our main point of view for the events that happen on the Earth Branch is through Takaki, the blonde kid from Season 1 who eventually took up Biscuit's duties under Orga. Takaki is now able to afford an apartment on Earth with his little sister Fuka, who he's also putting through school. He's also developed a close friendship with the former human debris Aston. While Tekkadan has been working hard to train the newly minted Arbrow Defense Force, they're looked down upon not only by the soldiers, but by the older members of the Tekkadan Earth Branch. Being bullied by the older guys is the least of Tekkadan's problems on Earth, as we see Rustal Elian tell Julieta and Eok that he has contacted that man to help hinder Tekkadan's activities on Earth, mostly because Rustal wants to poke the bear a bit and see how McGillis responds. The man that Rustal is talking about is the barrel-chested, beard-faced mercenary Galen Massa, who collaborates with Tekkadan Earth Branch's Mr. Radis to plant a bomb in a bouquet of flowers that is rigged to kill the leader of Arbrow, Toganosuke Makanai. Wow, that was a big sentence. The bomb goes off right before Makanai's speech at the Defense Force's inauguration, and the only reason that Makanai lives is due to Chad's heroics, as the leader of Tekkadan's Earth Branch tackles the old man to the ground. Unfortunately, Chad falls into a coma after this, putting the Earth Branch into the treacherous hands of Mr. Radis and the unfortunately easily manipulated Takaki. Takaki trusts Radis, privately believing that the older man is part of Tekkadan and thus part of the family. But the newer members, particularly those of the Earth Branch, don't harbor these brotherly feelings. In fact, Radis seems to absolutely despise the original Tekkadan members, calling them nothing more than animals to Galen Massa. Radis puts himself in a position to cut off all communication between the Earth Branch and Mars HQ, and when Takaki gets worried and requests to talk to Orga directly, Radis turns him down. He then turns the situation around on Takaki, saying that communication is his responsibility while Chad recovers, and Takaki has to be the leader that Tekkadan needs without waiting around on Orga's orders. While Orga and the others get stonewalled by Radis, who tells them that nothing out of the ordinary is really going on, the rumors of a possible war between Arbrow and the SAU cause them to worry, and Orga orders Akihiro and Eugene to go to Earth with the Shidens and find out what's really going on. However, it will take 3 weeks to get there. The Arbrow government blames the SAU for the bombing, causing both sides to send troops to their shared border on the Balfor plain. While tensions are high, no shots are fired until an SAU recon plane crashes due to the Ahab reactors of Arbrow mobile suits cutting its engines. The SAU hadn't expected Arbrow to fortify its border with mobile suits, but this unfortunate accident is taken as an excuse to kick off the fighting in full. While the SAU has a Gjallarhorn garrison advising them and Brigadier General McGillis there as well, the war drags on for weeks. McGillis says this is because Tekkadan are the most experienced soldiers on the field, and their guerrilla tactics and use of terrain has ground the SAU advance to a halt. Of course, this is all just a scheme by Massa and Radis to drag the war on for Rustal's favor. Tekkadan does most of the fighting on Arbrow's side, and a few weeks into the conflict, Aston and Takaki are tired of burying friends. Everyone's moods has changed during the fighting, with Aston even referring to himself as human debris once more. Tekkadan takes losses, but Takaki keeps forging ahead on Galen Massa's orders. He trusts the Merc completely and has been manipulated into thinking that the Arianer-Hod plant has their best interests at heart. The Isaribi arrives at Earth to resupply their ground forces, but are told that they cannot land due to the ongoing unrest in Arbrow. Eugene won't be deterred by this and says that they'll find another way onto the planet. And also we see that Hush has begun training in a Shiden simulator under Mika's guidance. From here on out, the beef that he had with Mika is pretty much gone, with Hush's new goal being to learn from Mikazuki in order to eventually surpass him. Finally, one morning McGillis decides that the war has gone on long enough and needs a decisive battle to bring things to a close, so he takes to the field himself. Gallon, Takaki, and Aston find McGillis while scouting and engage him with his men. Gallon is conveniently tied up by one of the grunts while Aston and Takaki go to fight the general. Takaki's landman Rhodey is severely damaged, but Aston takes a direct shot meant for his friend's cockpit. This sacrifice puts Gallon in the perfect position to shoot McGillis, but at the very last second he is knocked away by the arriving Barbados. Mika reveals that Orga ordered them to keep McGillis safe, and with the Mars branch here to discover the truth, Gallon decides that the jig is up and flees the battle. Unfortunately, Aston gets one of the most brutal deaths this season, as he tells Takaki he wishes that he never met him while he bleeds out. Aston was used to his life as human debris, never really caring if he lived or died. But now that he has friends in Tekkadan, particularly Takaki and Fuka, it's a life that he doesn't want to lose. It hits pretty hard, and while it sounds harsh at first, it really is a statement that shows just how much Takaki meant to him. And that's not the only brutal death that we have coming either, so buckle up. If it's any solace, Rhodey also gets it pretty bad, as Eugene and the others catch up to him at the office and interrupt his plans to escape. Eugene reveals they landed in neighboring territory and arrived by land, which is apparently something that Gallon and Rhodey didn't think they would do for some reason. Takaki offers to deal with Rhodey as he feels responsible for the events of the last few weeks, and though he begs, it doesn't stop Takaki from shooting him in the office. Tekkadan just taken out businessmen left and right this season. At least they get some information on Gallon Massa from Rhodey before they kill him. The mercenary is hiding out with his men in SAU territory, waiting for another war or another job to fill his time. Tekkadan's mobile suits attack Gallon's position, and we see Hush get his first bit of action, though he's almost taken out and is saved by Mika, who tells him not to get in the way. This moment where Hush almost dies really cements the power gap between himself and Mikazuki in his mind. And from here on out, Hush works pretty tirelessly to learn all he can from his mentor in order to become a better pilot. In the end, it's Akihiro that takes down Gallon, and while it is satisfying, it is a little annoying that Gallon talks shit right up until his death. Like, there's no moment in this fight where Akihiro is in danger. Even when Gallon self-destructs while being grappled by the Gusion, the big Gundam comes out of the fireball without even a scratch on the paint. The border crisis between Arbrow and the SAU has come to an end, but it does have a lot of consequences. For one, McGillis wanted to expand the regulatory fleet's grip on the Mars sphere, but the rest of the 7 stars are now backing down on the idea due to his involvement in Arbrow. Nobody can come up with any information on Gallon Massa or how he was responsible for orchestrating the conflict, and McGillis suspects that Rustal has somehow hidden his identity. Orga effectively shutters the Earth branch and orders everybody back to Mars, except for Takaki, who ultimately decides to quit the company and live his life on Earth with his sister. We get a little post-credits scene of him walking her home from school after his normal job, and man, Takaki, honestly, he really deserves it, and I'm happy at least one Tekkadan member got a happy ending. Despite the quagmire that Tekkadan just got itself out of, Orga meets with McGillis to discuss future plans. McGillis, under the guise of the masked Montag, tells Orga that there's a large conflict brewing within Gjallarhorn and wants to reaffirm their relationship. He says that if Tekkadan helps him reach the top of Gjallarhorn, he will turn the powers of Gjallarhorn Mars branch over to Orga, making him the undisputed king of Mars. Orga does consult with the other members of Tekkadan's inner circle, but ultimately he wants to go through with McGillis' plan. Orga tells McMurdo of the plan, and although the old man is pissed at not being consulted first, he agrees that it will have huge benefits for Tewaz if they can actually pull it off. Of course, this makes Jazzly go off. I mean, he was mad before and thought Tekkadan were a bunch of punks, but now he actually starts scheming to take them out. And you don't want to mess with Chad Chin McPimpcoat over here. To cool things off with the Tewaz Council of top gangster businessmen, Naze offers to stake his life on Orga's plan as collateral if it ever hurts Tewaz. This is no small thing, and Naze tells Orga not to apologize for a decision he's already made, but this also comes with a warning. As much as Naze does care for Orga and want to protect him and the rest of Tekkadan, he will not betray McMurdo and says that this is the last time he will treat Orga lightly. Orga is then taken to the Gjallarhorn space station Ares and told that Tekkadan can use an entire wing of the station for staging the upcoming operation against Rustal. Yeah, remember back in Season 1 when they had to avoid Ares at all costs and could barely make it off Mars? Well, now they own half that station, and surely expanding that much in that short of time could only come with good things, right? I haven't really mentioned him yet, but Rustal has a masked underling that goes by the name of Vidar. Yeah, IBO gets 2 masked characters, isn't it special? Vidar has basically just been hanging out on Rustal's ship, waiting for the work on his Gundam to be done. The Gundam Vidar. Yes, he named it after himself, or he named himself after it, as Julieta suspects. Vidar finally decides to do something and helps Rustal put down the uprisings in the colonies for good. We get a few shots of his mobile suit fighting, and the color scheme is really cool, but Vidar won't become truly important until later on. He's also kind of the polar opposite of Eok, who's maybe the most annoying character in this entire show, and is about to cement the reason that everyone hates him in the upcoming arc. Tekkadan really can't catch a break, as right after, they all return to Mars and are met with some harrowing news. The newly opened mine that they are now responsible for has unearthed more than the half-metal ore. When they first obtained the mine, they discovered a strange machine that was similar to a mobile suit, but differently shaped. It appeared to be inert, so they shipped it off to Saisei for the chief engineer to study. Not long after, they unearth a Gundam frame by the name of Gundam Floros, adding a third Gundam to their impressive roster and making Shino incredibly happy. The Gundam jealousy was starting to get to him as his Ryusei Go continually fell behind the Barbados and Gusion. When nobody can figure out what this weird machine that was buried with the Gundam is, they decide they may as well use McGillis' resources and call on him to check Gjallarhorn's database. When McGillis gets a match, he informs them that this machine is called a Pluma and to stop excavating pieces immediately. McGillis says that this is a mobile armor, and it's a big enough deal that the general departs for Mars to deal with it personally. Jazzly gets wind that McGillis is coming to the Mars sphere, and he decides that he can barter that information to Rustal for some good favor. He does this through Eok Kujan, who he knows through previous family connections. And we see that Rustal actually says the Pluma is an accessory to the much larger mobile armor, which are unmanned craft that are hugely powerful and are responsible for starting the Calamity War all those years ago. Vidar comes up with the idea that McGillis might want to activate this buried mobile armor in order to defeat it and gain something known as an Order of the Seven Stars. Basically, back in the Calamity War, it was the highest commendation given to a pilot that destroyed an armor, and obtaining one might give McGillis enough clout to take control of Gjallarhorn without even having to fight Rustal. The funny thing about this is that McGillis has absolutely no plan to take one of these commendations, and was actually planning on destroying the armor without ever activating it. That's how dangerous it is. To prove this, he and multiple members of Tekkadan show up without mobile suits because the Ahab reactors run the risk of awakening the sleeping armor. This leads to Tekkadan being defenseless when the giant dumbass Eok shows up with his men, stomping all over the place in his mobile suit trying to arrest McGillis, and the giant human eradicating monster is woken up. Not only does the Hashmal mobile armor have heavy nanolaminate armor and a variety of weapons, it also has a legion of the accessory Pluma units that act as attackers and repair the main body. If all that wasn't bad enough, the armor is completely controlled by an AI with only one goal: seek out human population centers and destroy them. The Hashmal takes out Eok and his men pretty much nearly instantly. While Eok is still alive, the loss of his men is a black mark that will follow him for the rest of the series, and cause him to make even dumber decisions. By the time that Shino and Dante arrive in mobile suits, the armor has taken off in the direction of Kree's city. Tekkadan sets up an ambush in the gorges outside of the city, and Mika vows to Orga that he will not let the mobile armor breach their defenses. That's when Eok shows back up and shoots the Hashmal, causing it to divert its course and head towards an agricultural plant. Dude, Eok shows up and shoots this giant war machine one time and immediately starts celebrating and saying that he took it down. No wonder Julieta calls him fucking stupid all the time. The armor attacks civilians at the plant, with Ride jumping in front of the huge beam weapon, causing the beam to split apart and kill a bunch of people anyway. This is one of the first times we get to see an energy weapon in IBO, and it's devastating to the buildings and people, but the nano-laminate armor of the mobile suits means they can tank a hit without being totally destroyed. I'm pretty sure Ride didn't know that when he jumped in front of the laser though. Also, please don't get mad at me for saying laser there, laser beam, I know they're different, but not even the UC keeps that consistent, so don't scream at me please. Now, we have multiple groups, including Gjallarhorn soldiers from the Arianerhod fleet, McGillis' regulatory fleet, and Tekkadan all trying to figure out how they can stop this armor. Vidar even shows up and faces down McGillis and Isurugi in the canyons, but their fight doesn't last very long before Julieta calls him away. I gotta say, I do love Isurugi's mobile suit. Sorry for this one, but it's the Helmwij Rheinkar. I think that's how you pronounce it. Look, you've heard me pronounce Japanese terribly all day and all night. Now you could hear me mispronounce Space German. It really reminds me of the random suits from Gundam X with the horns. Also, he has a giant greatsword, and, well, we all know, I really love mechs that have giant hefty weapons straight out of Breakblade. The Tekkadan Gundam pilots start suffering adverse effects from their proximity to the mobile armor. We already know that Mika suffered permanent physical harm from pushing Barbatos too hard, resulting in the loss of the use of one of his arms and the eyesight in one of his eyes. We find out that this is due to a limiter installed in the mech's operating system that stems the flow of information between the Gundam and the Alea Vijnana system. Removing this limiter will allow the Gundam to fight at full power, but the pilot's brains will be completely overloaded and it will have dire consequences. Also, I should mention the reason they can't just fight the armor with the limiters on is because the presence of the Hashmal makes the Gundams basically get all pumped up. The Gundams were designed to destroy the mobile armors and have an almost animal instinct driving them to fight. Orga comes up with a plan to separate the Hashmal from its plumas so that they can't heal it using the Gundam Floros' Galaxy Cannon. This huge railgun packs enough of a semi-legal punch to collapse the canyon's walls, allowing McGillis, Isurugi, and the rather bewildered Julieta to fight Hashmal on its own. Oh yeah, also the Floros was just finished being reconstructed, so Yamagi had to ride in the cockpit with Shino by sitting on his lap. I don't think I really mentioned it during the Season 1 video because it's a very small part of that season, and Yamagi's not really a super important character in Season 1, but he has a huge crush on Shino. The season puts more of a spotlight on it as it goes on, and I'll get a little more in-depth as it becomes more relevant, but honestly, I was pretty impressed with how IBO handled a one-sided gay attraction between these characters in a respectful and kind of understanding way. The Hashmal isn't even damaged by their full-on assault, and just as it's about to give Ride his second near-death experience in the last 10 minutes, Mika and the Barbatos show up to save the day. Mika ignores Orga's orders not to engage the mobile armor with a Gundam frame and decides to take the limiters off, just like he did when he fought the Grey's Ayn in Edmonton. Mika ignores all of the damage that Barbatos is taking in order to get an advantage on the armor. Man, the movements in this episode are really cool. Especially when he borrows Isurugi's greatsword to crush the Hashmal's head. Having saved Kree's, Mika's reward is the loss of use of both of his legs. Much like at the end of Season 1, pouring too much data into the AV system has taken its toll on Mika's brain. Kudelia and Atra both visit him in a pretty depressing scene, and while Mika seems pretty much the same attitude-wise, he does lament the fact that he will no longer be able to help at Sakura Farm. Kudelia confides in Atra that she was afraid to come see Mika for just this reason. At least if Mika's attitude had changed, or if he was afraid or angry, he might not go out in the Gundam again, but Kudelia and Atra both realize that he'll keep going out in Barbatos until he dies. Atra breaks down with Kudelia, and we get the very famous scene where Atra asks Kudelia to have a baby with him, saying that a child is one way for a memory to live on. Of course, Kudelia's like, why don't you have a kid with him? And Atra gets all flustered. Man, it really does show how fucked up IBO's future is when two kids having a kid together is seen as something hopeful between them. This on top of McGillis's arranged marriage cements the whole future feudalism thing. Hey, I guess if a child soldier who's killed countless people at 15 and a formerly homeless orphan turned warship cook want to have a kid, well, then who am I to judge? Tekkadan destroying Hashmal before it can attack the city improves their reputation even further. Iok is reprimanded by Rustal and forced to sit out of action for a while for literally causing the opposite of what they wanted to happen. And now that McGillis has witnessed the true strength of a pilot with an AV system, he wants that power for himself. Iok doesn't take his scolding sitting down, and he runs to Jazli to tell him to attack Tekkadan. Jazli says that's dumb, and they should attack the Turbines instead, as Naze constantly looks out for Orga and has been gaining way too much power. So the two come up with a plan to destroy the Turbines using Gjallarhorn. The weapon that the Gundam Floros uses for its galaxy cannon is a piece of Calamity War era tech called a Dainsleaf, which is very illegal. However, this version has been modified by Tewaz to fire a different type of ammunition, so it's technically in a legal gray area. However, Gjallarhorn inspectors under Iok's orders plant an illegal Dainsleaf on a turbine ship during an inspection and accuse them of attempting to deliver it to Tekkadan. This results in a confrontation between Gjallarhorn and the Turbines, which Naze tells Orga to stay out of. Even McMurdo is powerless in this situation, saying that attempting to help Naze would only get all of Tewaz drawn into a war with Gjallarhorn. Orga does send Akihiro and the others to the Turbines location to help the non-combat members of the company escape. Plus, Akihiro and Laughter have been undergoing a sort of blooming relationship this season, and he's not going to sit around and let people die. Naze does attempt to surrender after he evacuates the Hammerhead, but Iok tells his men to ignore the white flag signal and then fires on the turbine ship with a volley of illegal Dainsleafs anyway, just to be a huge asshole about it. These weapons in their original form are incredibly devastating, and they rip through mobile suits and the fleeing transport ships like their armor is made out of paper. At least this battle gives Amida, Naze's main squeeze, some time to shine as she battles with Julieta. Julieta cannot figure out why, with all of her state-of-the-art training and her advanced Gjallarhorn mobile suit, she just can't match up to the older woman. Even with the help of Akihiro and the others, the Dainsleaf volleys are just too devastating, and Naze ends up charging the Gjallarhorn line with Amida to buy the non-combatants time to escape. The Hammerhead collides with two Gjallarhorn ships and goes up in a ball of fire. Naze dies with a smile on his face, knowing that he gave his life to protect those that he loves. Orga makes an actual good decision here and decides not to retaliate against Gjallarhorn or Jazli, who he suspects is behind the planted weapon, because Naze asked him not to. Attacking would be exactly what Jazli wants, and Orga is determined not to give it to him. This leads to Jazli doing perhaps the meanest thing that happens in this series. I mentioned the budding romance between Laughter and Akihiro, and Laughter has been considering leaving the Turbines to join Tekkadan as a pilot to be with him. But after the destruction of the Turbines, she decides to stay with the former members to look out for them, as McMurdo has promised to take care of all the former Turbines members and find work for them directly under him and Tewaz so that they won't be exploited. Jazli is pissed off that Tekkadan won't take the bait and attack him, so he just puts a hit out on Laughter and has her shot to death in broad daylight on the Saisei. He then goes right to McMurdo and taunts him, telling the old man that he should get out of the way and let the new generation take over. Now, the problem with Jasley is he's like a huge fucking dumbass, and his only allies are even dumber than he is. McGillis is able to get his hands on the planted Dainsleaf and analyzes it, realizing that Eok and Rustal were behind Jasley's plan all along. McGillis then pledges his full support to Orga, saying that he will have the full backing of the regulatory fleet if they decide to attack JPT Trust. Orga does fear that his actions will cause him to fall out of Tewaz, but McGillis assures him that he will never betray Tekkadan, and Orga promises the same. Finally, we get a reveal of the newly repaired and upgraded Barbatos Lupus Rex, and Orga tells Mika to forget that Tewaz were former allies, fight Jasley with all the ferocity and rage that he can muster. And fight they do, as episode 17 opens in the midst of battle between Tekkadan and JPT Trust. All of Tekkadan is mobilized for this fight, including all 3 Gundams and Orga in command of the Isaribi. While Jasley has a deal with Eok to flank Tekkadan and defeat them here, Eok is late, of course, so Jasley orders his men to hold out until reinforcements arrive and fight Tekkadan in a battle of attrition, which is hard to do when Barbatos is icing grunts left and right. I mean, the thing has a fucking tail at this point and Mika uses it like a whip. That's not even mentioning the enraged bodybuilder in a giant metal Goro from Mortal Kombat and the big flamboyant mech that dual wields railguns. Yeah, the battle is a tough one for Jasley. The battle drags on and Eok still doesn't show up. With Jasley's forces down to 50%, he calls McMurdo to grovel, saying that Orga went mad and Tekkadan just attacked them for no reason. However, McMurdo knows about the scheme Jasley made with Eok and brokered a deal with Rustal about the illegal Dainsleaf. McMurdo pretty much tells Jasley to get fucked, saying that Tekkadan quit Tewaz so he couldn't stop them anyway, even if he wanted to. Jasley tries to contact Orga to work out a deal, but Orga isn't the least bit interested and gives Mika the order to destroy the bridge of Jasley's ship, killing the second in command of Tewaz and putting JPT Trust out of business. Right after the battle with Jasley, Orga reveals a news broadcast to the inner circle of Tekkadan, showing McGillis' faction of Gjallarhorn openly rebelling. The broadcast details Rustal's involvement with Galen Massa and the Arbrow border crisis, as well as Eok Kujan's involvement in framing the Turbines. They're also put on blast for their blatant hypocrisy in using the illegal Dainsleaf weapons for themselves. With McGillis' plan to take over Gjallarhorn now out in the open, we get a flashback that shows some of his upbringing and, trigger warning for sexual abuse. In Season 1, we got some flashbacks to McGillis' childhood from Gaelio's perspective that showed him as an angry loner who eventually became the McGillis we know. But here we see that McGillis grew up as an orphan who had to kill for food, was sex trafficked in the criminal underworld, and was eventually adopted by Lord Isnario Farid. Lord Farid played the attentive, adoptive father to the outside world, but physically and sexually abused McGillis in private. So now I'm kinda wishing that McGillis just murdered him instead of exiled him at the end of Season 1, that sick freak. McGillis found strength in the writings of Agnika Kieru, the founder of Gjallarhorn and hero of the Calamity War. McGillis swore to adopt the ideals of Agnika and essentially become him reincarnated. All this leads to McGillis wanting to obtain the secret that is hidden in the basement of the Gjallarhorn headquarters, the ancient and very powerful Gundam frame Bael. The machine is said to harbor the soul of Agnika Kieru, and McGillis believes that obtaining it will give him full command over Gjallarhorn, as it is said that the one who pilots Bael speaks for Agnika. Now that the coup is underway, Orga and the rest of Tekkadan are waiting in orbit around Earth with the regulatory fleet. The Arianerhod fleet is massing in lunar orbit, and Orga says their main goal is to buy McGillis time while he pulls off his plan, and he sends Mika with the Barbatos to defend the general. Well, apparently Mika wasn't keeping that great an eye out because Vidar crashes through the ceiling to challenge McGillis to a fight to the death. Vidar finally takes off his mask, revealing the scarred face of Gjallarhorn Bowdween, McGillis' former best friend and soon-to-be brother-in-law. Gjallarhorn expounds on the fact that he never really knew McGillis, and McGillis was the one who was really wearing a mask all this time. Really, the reason why Gjallarhorn has stayed alive this long is simply to find out what is so important that McGillis would betray everyone in his life for. Mika finally arrives and Gjallarhorn knows he can't beat the Barbatos alone, so he reveals that his Gundam Vidar is equipped with a modified AV system that contains all the information from Ein's brain. This allows Gjallarhorn to fight as though the limiters of the AV system are turned off, with no extra load being put on his brain. Apparently there's some sort of Alea Visionana fire sale because McGillis reveals that he also had the system installed, though his version is much closer to the ones used by Gjallarhorn during the Calamity War. He successfully activates Gundam Bael, something that's said only to be possible by someone worthy of taking Agnika's mantle, and Gjallarhorn runs away so that he doesn't have to fight a 2v1, he's not stupid. He doesn't just run away though, Gjallarhorn goes ahead and does a broadcast revealing that he, the son of the Bowdween family, is still alive and reveals all the treachery that McGillis has wrought. This is sort of where McGillis' plan hits a bit of a snag, and I kinda realize that Blondie here is, well, kinda dumb. At a meeting with the rest of the 7 stars that he's not currently trying to kill, McGillis demands control of Gjallarhorn by saying that he who controls Bael controls the organization. McGillis is thrown for a loop when the other families just decide not to get involved. They won't hinder the Revolutionary Fleet's battle with Rustal, but they aren't going to send soldiers to their deaths against the Gjallarhorn either. McGillis really didn't expect this, and he pretty much has no plan B besides calling Orga and demanding that Tekkadan get ready to fight Rustal. So McGillis, who's been hatching this plan to acquire Bael since he was a child, never considered that the old-ass politicians running the 7 stars might not give a shit about a book from hundreds of years ago. Tekkadan is made part of the Revolutionary Fleet and is targeted heavily by Rustal's forces during the battle. Things are fairly even on either side until a spy in McGillis' ranks fires an illegal Dainsleaf at Rustal's lines. This gives the Gjallarhorn fleet pretense to let loose with a volley of the destructive weapons themselves, in an attack that turns the tide in Rustal's favor. Tekkadan actually has to abandon the Hotarubi and congregate aboard the Isaribi, and Shino takes a hit while kicking Ride out of the way. Shino survives with only a broken arm, but asks Yamagi for a favor. Install a real Dainsleaf onto the Gundam Floros, built from data found in the Gundam's systems. They then come up with a plan to have the Gundam Floros charge the Gjallarhorn fleet and destroy its flagship with the Super Galaxy Cannon, with the Isaribi as backup. Shino fires a shot from the hull of the sinking Hotarubi, but a shot from Julieta hits him at the last second and knocks his Super Galaxy Cannon off course. Shino launches towards the fleet in a last-ditch attempt to destroy the ship, but is blown out of the sky in front of everyone. Poor Yamagi just watching, damn man. McGillis faces down Gjallarhorn in the Gundam Vidar, but the Vidar has returned to its true form, the Gundam Chimeras from Season 1. Isurugi helps the general fight off Gjallarhorn until they see Tekkadan start to retreat, and McGillis gives the order to follow their lead. The battle against the Gjallarhorn fleet is a definitive loss for the revolutionaries, with their numbers and morale being reduced significantly. Of course, McGillis won't be deterred from his goal, and tells Orga that they can still count on the Mars branch to back them up, leaving them with about half of the forces that they started with. Orga is less than enthused, but McGillis says that a symbolic victory over the skies of Mars will mean more in the long run anyway. So while it sounds like they have a plan and still have a chance at coming out on top, it all starts to crumble when McGillis is denied entry to Ares Station and told that the Mars branch isn't going to help him. Apparently McGillis' support on Earth has fallen so low after that battle that he basically doesn't have any. Tekkadan is used as a scapegoat by Rustal and the other high-ranking members of Gjallarhorn so that all the blame won't be laid on their shoulders. Tekkadan finds their accounts frozen and Mars HQ quickly surrounded by Gjallarhorn forces. With their communications completely cut off, Orga comes up with one final plan with help from Kudelia. If they can reach Earth, Makanai can erase their Arbrow IDs and issue them new ones, because Kreese is technically a colony of Arbrow. To do this, they have to get to the city, but the only way to do that is by taking an old telephone line service tunnel. McGillis isn't one to just sit around and decides that he's going to charge the Gjallarhorn front line before they can attack, allowing Orga, Kudelia, and a few others to slip by and arrive in the city faster. Surprisingly, this plan actually works, mostly because Gundam Bael is pretty OP and McGillis takes out everyone and then leaves pretty easily. In the city, Orga actually gets some good news, as Makanai agrees to help them with new identities on Earth, but only because Chad saved his life. Also, the Admos company got an email from Ozzy, who recovered from the shock of seeing Laughter's murder, and is taking up Naze's mantle as a Tewaz shipping affiliate. She even has his hat. She offers to smuggle them all to Earth free of charge with McMurdo's consent. At the slightest hint of anything going right for Tekkadan, the universe says nope, fuck that. As Orga, Ride, and Chad are leaving the Admos company, a car full of men working for Nobliss Gordon opens fire. Orga shields Ride and returns fire, killing one of the assailants, but being riddled with bullets in the process. Orga bleeds out on the sidewalk, giving one final order, for the others in Tekkadan to never give up and keep moving forward. Once everyone gets the news that Orga's been killed, they all start to freak out, until Mika finally makes a decision for himself, for once in the entire series. He calls a meeting with everyone and gives a speech demanding that they all follow Orga's final order. Mika, Hush, Akihiro, Eugene, and Dante plan to attack Gjallarhorn's lines head-on in order to give everyone else enough time to escape through the tunnel. While Tekkadan is fighting their final battle on Mars, McGillis is up in space single-handedly attacking Rustal's fleet, which causes Gaelio to come out and meet him. At this point, McGillis seems like he's lost in his own sauce. Like, he keeps going on about being the pilot of Bael and doesn't really seem to have a plan beyond trying to kill everybody. Bael is a strong mobile suit, and McGillis's AV system makes him one of the strongest pilots in the entire series, but if he could have taken the Arianerhad fleet by himself, he probably would have done it the first time. This is proven true when he's bested by Gaelio, who's able to use the Elia Vijnana type Ein to overpower Bael. McGillis only ever relied upon his own strength, using his friends as disposable tools and stepping stones, but Gaelio, who truly treasured the relationships he had with Ein, Carta, and even McGillis, is able to use the vestiges of those relationships to win in the end. On Mars, Hush is taken out by a giant axe to the chest, but Mika calls him on the radio and asks him to hold that position as an equal. And this is kind of an abrupt ending to Hush's arc. I mean, his arc kind of ended like a third of the way through the series, and then they just did nothing with him, so kind of a black mark from me there. Not all the Tekkadan members still fighting on Mars are doomed to a grisly fate though, as Eugene and some of the younger members fall back through the tunnel once everyone else is clear. This leaves Mika and Akihiro to cover their escape, a task that they both know is fatal. The two Gundams barely even take a hit until Rustal targets them with a Dainsleif strike from orbit, which is absolutely devastating and shows why these things were banned in the first place. The Gundams are damaged enough that they're nearly falling apart, and Mika and Akihiro are almost completely overwhelmed. Akihiro only lives long enough to become enraged at hearing Eok's name, and gives him one of the most grisly and satisfying deaths in the entire series, as he crushes him to death with the big Gundam scissors. Mika finally succumbs to his wounds while fighting Julieta, and when his cockpit is ripped open, we see that he was already unconscious. The show wastes no time after the deaths of like half of our major characters in cutting to a "where are they now" style ending, showing us how the world has evolved over time. Gjallarhorn has shifted away from the old nobility of the Seven Stars towards a more democratic system, and the economic blocks of Earth have lost their grip on the Mars colonies, giving rise to the Mars Union. And who better to be the chairperson of the Union than Kudelia, who signs a law in partnership with Rustal Elian banning the use of human debris. A lot of former Tekkadan seem to be working for Admos Company or directly for Kudelia, and then there is Ride, who took Orga's death so hard that he tracks down Noblest Gordon and kills him while he's pooping. All while in a Setsuna cosplay, so at least he has a sense of style. Finally, we see Kudelia return home to the farm, where she co-parents Mika and Atra's child, which is honestly just kind of a bittersweet ending that stuck with me for a pretty long time. Mobile Suit Gundam Iron-Blooded Orphans Season 2 is kind of a weird duck for the series. I think for once I actually like it a little bit less upon rewatch, which is fairly uncommon for me. The most common criticism seems to be that the season was rushed, and I can see where that comes from. There are a lot of separate arcs in this season, and because Tekkadan are now stretched over various locations, it feels like you get to spend way less time with them as a group. Those moments of Mika and Orga hanging out and being friends in the first season are pretty much gone, except for a few instances, and a lot of the slower slice of life stuff has been thrown out in favor of even more action and political intrigue. Characters in Season 2 also seem to make a bunch of bad decisions. I know that isn't out of the norm for Orga, but it's kind of hard to watch knowing that at any point Tekkadan could have just stopped and been fine. It also stings a little bit that McGillis is shown to be this master schemer and manipulator, but then his plan is so incredibly simple that it falls apart almost immediately. At the very least, Season 2 has incredible animation and a lot of good mecha action. It's just sort of a shame that Season 1 seemed to have more of a coherent message, and Season 2 was content with being mostly depressing. Hey there everybody, welcome to the end card. Thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. Let me go ahead and thank my channel members, aka Batosai, Azure, Windress, Brian, Sanchez, Chris Goodnow, Daniel Johnson, Gert, Gormac, Harmonious, Hidden Insanity, Jessica Solberg, Jay Lamb, Joe Castellanos, Joe Cavazos, Johnny G, Canto 20, Sindustries, Trey Hardy, Wyatt Dietz, and Zappa Slave. Thank you all so much for continuing to be channel members. It means a lot to me. I hope you all enjoyed this video going over the second season of Gundam IBO. I kind of actually changed my opinion on this season after watching it multiple times. I don't like it as much as I used to. Just think it's a little bit too depressing for me now. I did enjoy it my first time I ever watched it though. So coming up next, the next actual retrospective is going to be Nadesco. I really like that show, and I was going to do Zoids, and then I started watching Nadesco, and I just ended up like really enjoying it. So I'm gonna do that next. Also, Gundam G-Cux is coming out. I know it's GQX or whatever, but I'm gonna call it G-Cux. And I think I might just do like a weekly vlog video talking about the Gundam G-Cux episode of the week as the season goes on. So I guess look out for that next week. I think it starts airing, on the 8th or 9th, so that would be really fun. Over on the gaming channel, we're making our way through Mass Effect 3 still. Almost done with that, over halfway. We're also doing all the DLC. And then we're about halfway done with Chrono Trigger. So go over to Recon 404 Gaming if you want to see that. They are Let's Plays because I am old. And then also, last year I did a bunch of PS2 stuff during the summer. I don't know if I'm going to do a big summer thing on that channel this year. Maybe I'll do all Xbox 360 games because I want to feel young again. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed. And I'll see you guys real soon. I'm pretty much like almost halfway done with the next video anyway. So I would expect there to be more videos in the future, not take as long. So see you then.